Holy ball of chain. Welcome to the Manwich Show. What's going on, everybody? Today's topic is going to be the Billy Carson, Wes Huff debate, of which I've seen 3 times, the original debate. And I caught it way before a lot of you others. I seen it I think it came out 3 weeks ago. And even then I couldn't help but watch it a second and a third time. Now, granted, this would be my 4th time. We're not going to watch the entire debate. Matter of fact, Billy Carson's point of view on biblical literature is, I think it's eradicated within the first 5 or 10 minutes. Quickly, though, he's dismantled, which speaks volumes because, for instance, he was on Joe Rogan and he was on PBD podcasts. He was on the circuit of these podcasts that allowed him to come on their shows. And what does he do? He said what he wanted, and people took it at face value. Nobody checked him out. Nobody, let's just say, I mean, I could have got on there and said anything that I wanted to say then on these platforms and been taken seriously then. Why not? Why not have me be taken seriously? Maybe I am the leader of the flying spaghetti monsters, right? I mean, come on now. But anyhow, none of his stuff was fact checked. No true credentials. He was just, it boggles my mind. It makes me wonder who built him up, to where he became a face of the New Age movement. But before I say anything else, let me get my disclaimer out there.
The views, opinions, and representations expressed are those of the hosts, guests, and participants, and are not necessarily those of or endorsed by the management, other hosts, or advertisers of the network. The show is found on the
Manwich.
Manwich, the regular, original.
Dig in, guys.
can, but do not necessarily promote any particular lifestyle, belief, religion, political affiliation, or other personal practice. These shows are for entertainment purposes only. Ta-da! And are not intended to treat, diagnose, and or claim any cure of disease or condition, or give any medical or legal advice. Good evening, or morning, depending on your time zone. From the Pacific to the Atlantic to you worldwide. Get yourself a cup of Java and find a comfy, easy chair. And get ready for my Manwich on Podcast Talk Radio After Dark. And now, it's Rich.
And that's all I had to say about that.
Ta-da!
Ta-da! I do want to make a note and mention that I'm no longer doing a podcast at this time, but the content that I am putting out is available for free, mind you, on Amazon Music, iHeart Radio, TikTok, Twitch, which of course we're live now, Rumble, YouTube. Of course, I'm also live both on YouTube and Rumble at this very moment. Spotify, and that about does it. I mean, I'm on Castbox also. I didn't bother to put Castbox out there because it's not one of those, in your face. It's not one of the big dogs. And I do have plans to get onto Twitch and maybe launch a Facebook account for the Manwich Show. But I figured I would definitely put that out there for everybody. In the event that you wanted to see this and any other content that's been produced by yours truly, you can find them on these various platforms. The links are all listed below. And with that said, let's get into it.
Wes Huff just set the standard for debating non-Christians. In case you hadn't heard, Wes Huff, a New Testament scholar, recently debated Billy Carson, an internet personality and, let's face it, a conspiracy theorist, and it was an absolute bloodbath. Their debate has since gone viral for all of the wrong reasons. For example, Billy was so distraught, apparently, by his poor debate performance that he produced a 3-hour stream making excuses and is now apparently attempting to sue everyone involved, including Wes. Well, in this video, I want to highlight what went right in this debate. In particular, I want to focus on the absolute masterclass of a debate performance that Wes put on. Not only was he knowledgeable, he was kind, thoughtful, and even cunning. Let's start with the clip of Wes's first interaction with Billy.
Yeah, well, first let me say, I think it's really cool to not just be in the room proverbially with you, Billy, but be able to interact with you, because I wish I could be there in person. Unfortunately, Toronto, Canada is a long way away from Florida. It's a little bit of a jaunt, but I really appreciate the fact that you seem to have investigated to a certain degree some of these facts. Do you mind if I ask a clarifying question?
So Wes's strategy, I want you to notice this, going in was basically initially to build some rapport with Billy. He didn't go in with insults. He didn't even go straight into debating. He went in saying nice things about Billy. Now, after he does this, he goes directly into debate mode. And there's a really subtle way that he does this. He does it by asking a clarifying question.
Do you mind if I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
When you say the Sinai Bible, what are you referring to specifically?
It's the biblical text that was written. It made it into you can actually look it up on Amazon. It's a Bible called, I have a version at home. It's called the Sinai Bible, right, from Mount Sinai. I'm assuming that's the mountain that they're referencing there. But they put together their own version of the biblical text prior to the King James Version being put out.
Wes didn't just ask, this was not a random question that he asked here. Prior to the debate, he knew exactly what he wanted to address. going into this. One of the topics that he wanted to address is Billy's claim that the Sinai Bible doesn't mention the crucifixion. And here's what Wes could have done. He could have immediately gone in guns blazing and just spit out a bunch of facts about history, right? He could have just stated that the crucifixion is all over Codex Sinaiticus. He didn't do that. Instead, he asked Billy what he means by the Sinai Bible. And this question pretty much immediately led to a checkmate.
Sure. So when you refer to the Sinai Bible, would you be referring to Codex Sinaiticus? Like the codex that comes? Okay. That's why I was trying to get some clarification, because so you can actually go and see Codex Sinaiticus is at the British Library. So you can go and see it. It's on display. And the British Library has actually digitized the entire manuscript. So I work with manuscripts in my linguistic work. I'm an expert on early Christian scribal culture, and particularly in Greek and Coptic manuscripts. I have a facsimile. So I have a photocopy that was done by the British Library of Codex Sinaiticus that I work with in my office. So I have it here. And the only reason I asked for clarification is because I want to make sure that what I'm addressing is actually what you mean.
So notice how Wes says here that he wants to address Billy's actual claim. And this is actually really important. So like as Christians, we don't want to be strawmanning our opponents. We want to address the actual claims that they're making.
Because the Codex Sinaiticus in particular is just it's a 4th century Greek manuscript. Mm-hmm. It comes from approximately between 325 and 350 AD. And its text of the Gospels reads almost identical to the modern Greek text that we develop translations from. My curiosity is just simply in kind of exploring when you say that it denies the crucifixion or that the crucifixion isn't there. I mean, I can go on right now, Codex Sinaiticus, and I can look up the end of Matthew 27, where it has Jesus being crucified. And that's in Codex Sinaiticus, or, the John 19. Or any of the other ones. So I think my confusion is that it doesn't read any differently.
Okay, so a few things to note here. First, look at like Billy scrambling to ask ChatGPT like what to say in response to this. But second, this is a perfect example.
Dang, I never caught that. I never caught that.
Of Wes's masterful debate performance. Okay, he started with a clarifying question, but in asking the question, he already knew where things were headed. No matter what Billy said in response, he was prepared to give his own response. So guys, this is what Wes is teaching us here. A, have a strategy going into a debate, and then B, you got to know your stuff. This kind of setup, like this literally only took a couple minutes, but it happened because Wes had a strategy and he knows the literature. That is the takeaway in this clip. All right, in the next clip, Billy clarifies that he didn't mean Codex Sinaiticus. He meant the Gospel of Barnabas. I want you to pay attention to what Wes says in response.
That's where I was referencing, actually. I was misquoted. I misquoted there. It's the Gospel of Barnabas.
Okay, yeah, well, so that's good. So let's deal with that too, because I've actually worked with, there are 2 manuscripts of the Gospel of Barnabas. The Gospel of Barnabas is a really interesting document because it is a known forgery. And so that's why I think it's important to get to these sources. So at the very start of the Gospel of Barnabas, which we only have 2 copies of, one is in Italian and one is in Spanish. We see right off the bat that the Gospel of Barnabas, not to be confused with either the Epistle of Barnabas or the Acts of Barnabas, which are 2 apocryphal documents from the 2nd century, but the Gospel of Barnabas in particular, we know it's a forgery because it does things like in chapter 92, it says that Jesus spent 40 days on Mount Sinai, and then he came to the Jordan River and he walked to Jerusalem. But Mount Sinai is more than a week's journey away from Jerusalem, and neither Mount Sinai nor Jerusalem are close to the Jordan River. So never mind there not being a route from the Jordan River to like around Mount Sinai or going to Jerusalem. But there are internal problems with the Gospel of Barnabas, which indicate that it shows no actual indication of evidence of coming from or even having knowledge of 1st century Jewish understanding. It actually says Jesus is the Christ, but not the Messiah, which indicates that whoever the author is, he didn't know that those were the same words. And I think a bigger problem is that the Gospel of Barnabas actually paraphrases Dante's Inferno, which was written in 1314. So there's a lot of internal evidences that disqualify the Gospel of Barnabas, never mind the fact that we don't have any evidence of it prior to the 14th century, and none in any other language other than Middle Age Italian Italian and Spanish. But the internal content of the Gospel of Barnabas disqualifies it from being ancient. And then the fact that it's doing things like paraphrasing Dante, or it also refers to a rule of the time of Jubilee, which was changed in the Middle Ages from what it was in the biblical year of Jubilee. And it goes with the Middle Ages concept, not the ancient concept. What I'm getting at is, so I'm a historian, and I deal with sources. So when I'm looking at sources, I want to make sure that I have a methodology by which I approach any type of source. So if there is something that denies the crucifixion, I want to make sure that I'm analyzing it and that the methodology by which I analyze it actually reveals that the content can be accurately tied to the event. So if we're talking about, say, Codex Sinaiticus, that's in the 4th century. Now that is, I would agree with you, Billy, our oldest copy of the Bible in the sense of cover to cover, Genesis to Revelation copy of the Bible.
Right.
The problem is that we have individual copies of all 4 Gospels going back hundreds of years before Codex Sinaiticus. I have a facsimile behind me of P66. This is a late 2nd century copy of the Gospel of John. I work with this particular manuscript. I can just show the screen right here. This is an almost complete copy of the Gospel of John.
So cool that he has this on a shelf.
It
is that the
has the crucifixion.
by any chance?
Yeah, so papyrus is just the what it's made out of. So
I got that from Chat GPT, by the way.
Yeah,
Sorry,
so
guys, I'm just
I
trying
can
to sound
actually.
smart for a second.
I have that papyrus.
Oh, that's
So I'll show you this. So the documents you actually see on my bookshelf behind me are facsimile papyri that I've made. So when I was in Egypt last summer, I went and I got made for me some papyrus sheets. And so I take these papyrus sheets, which are made from the papyrus plant. And then when I go and I look at actual manuscripts, so I was at the University of
Dude literally just has papyrus in his house.
Philadelphia last summer, and I went and I saw a document called P1, which is a 3rd century fragment of the beginning of the Gospel of Matthew. And so what I did is I sat down with that original and I produced a facsimile. So I copied the text. First of all, I cut it out with an X-Acto knife in not the original 3rd century one on my papyrus. I cut out with an X-Acto knife this guy, and then I copied the text transcriptionally on the front and the back. So papyrus is just simply, it's what it's made out of.
Yeah.
And so there's categorizing systems, and the standard one is called the Gregory Allende categorizing system. And so sometimes you'll see when manuscripts
So he's spitting out a lot of information. I'm going to break it down in just a minute, so stick with me.
are mentioned, they'll have a GA and then a number behind it. If it's made of papyrus, you simply abbreviate the word papyrus to P, and then you have the numbering system. So P66, what I showed you earlier, that's this on the categorizing system. It's the 66th manuscript that was put into the system. It's from the Gospel of John. I also have, P46 and P47 on my shelf.
This next part is really important.
Includes all 4 Gospels and Acts from the 2nd and 3rd centuries. So the only hesitation I have with what you said, Billy, is that we have single copies of the Gospels that can be dated to the 2nd century that all do have the crucifixion. And so if we're relying on something like the Gospel of Barnabas, which is not just like, it's not that there's debate about it, it's that it's a known forgery. I mean, no one's referring to the Gospel of Barnabas as anything other than.
If you say it's a known forgery, yes, but I'm going to go with that. Let's talk.
Okay, so let's break down really quickly what Wes was doing in this section. Obviously, it was a long section, but I want to break it down for you guys. So obviously, his goal right here was to sort of set the record straight. Okay, he wanted to give some facts about these sources and then hopefully get some pushback from Billy on what he was saying in response. And this worked so well that Billy immediately concedes the point, and then attempts to shift back to talking about the Old Testament. But there's something else here that Wes does that some of you might have missed.
What I'm getting at is, so I'm a historian, and I deal with sources. So when I'm looking at sources, I want to make sure that I have a methodology by which I approach any type of source. So if there is something that denies the crucifixion, I want to make sure that I'm analyzing it and that the methodology by which I analyze it actually reveals that the content can be accurately tied to the event.
Prior to coming into this debate, Wes already had like a good feel for why Billy makes the claims that he does. Billy makes these claims because he has basically no good methodology for evaluating the credibility of historical sources. If some purported source says something that goes against what the majority of Christians believe, Billy seems to latch onto it uncritically. And Wes knew this, and this is why he discusses methodology in this section. And this comes into play later on in the debate when Billy mentions alleged eyewitness accounts that Wes hadn't yet heard of. Now, this part is fascinating. I want you to pay attention to the way that Wes handles this.
And that's less than 0.1%. You talk about eyewitness accounts, it's convinced you that Christianity is real. There's been eyewitness accounts of every culture that I've visited around this entire planet, and their eyewitness accounts of what they experienced is 100,000% opposite of what's in the Bible. People have
based on what do you mean? Can you give me an example?
The Dogon tribe, for example, in Mali, Africa, they experienced a culture that they claim came to this planet from Sirius B. They have the evidence that they knew these beings were from Sirius B because they have the instruments that show the orbit of a trinary star system that we couldn't discover until the 1970s.
I want you to notice this as Billy is starting to explain more in depth about what this people group actually believes. Look at Wes's reaction to this, even though he's never heard of this. Wes is just stone cold, like still very, very confident. Rhetorically, from a debate perspective, this is super important. If you're faced with information that you hadn't yet heard of, getting all flustered and looking down and looking away and stuff, like that can actually have a negative impact on the view of the audience on your debate performance. So Wes's reaction here is also really important to pay attention to.
Our modern technology, okay? They understood not only the orbital pattern of Sirius A, B, and C, but even that B was a failed star, which you can't see it from Earth with the naked eye. They knew that it was a white dwarf. They even knew that they said that if you took a tablespoon of it, the entire tribe or 1,000 men couldn't lift the tablespoon. They understood mass and gravity as well. They were told the shape, the sizes, and the colors of all the planets in our solar system, which they recorded. And there's only one wisdom keeper, and that person can never be touched by a person. If they get touched by another person, they'd actually be killed. And then they eventually have a mentee that they break down that verbally handed down knowledge to. And that next person then takes over and becomes the wisdom keeper. And they've been doing this for thousands and thousands of years. And science, modern science, has found all their information to be 1,000% accurate. Then you have the Hopi tribe of the Americas, indigenous tribes, Hopi tribe, Lakota tribe, also having engagements with these quote unquote star brothers, even having an account of them being taken underground, which you don't see just only in America. I just came back from Turkey. You have the people from Turkey in Mesopotamia also being taken underground into a place called Derinkuyu by these beings, by these people, a structure that's built 12 stories deep underground, that's made out of volcanic tuff, a very soft stone. And if you don't know what you're doing, it'll actually collapse. There's no evidence of any collapse. And it was thousands of years old. It was reused many times. So the mainstream story about what it was used for to hide from Romans is actually false. This place is ancient. And in order to build it, you actually have to have foreknowledge of how to construct this type of an underground civilization that can hold 20 to 30,000 people, places for livestock, places for worship, with no sign of collapse. And you have to have hundreds of ventilation shafts. And I've been down there. Those ventilation shafts cut through solid rock all the way down to the core. And there's even more. It links to other underground cities that are miles and miles away. As you get to the very base of this area, you can cut through and go to another location.
So this is the kind of stuff that people latch onto. Like, honestly, like you hear him talk about this stuff and you're like, whoa, that sounds crazy. I've never heard that before. That means that Christianity must be false. And I want you to notice, I mean, Wes is about to come back in here, but I want you to notice the way that Wes handles this. It's really important.
These people were taken under. Also, then you have the ancient Egyptians. Similar story. Major catastrophe comes. These people come and take them underground. Then you have the information in the Egyptian book of Going Forth by Day. More accounts by people, our ancestors, that have accounts that do not match up with the biblical text. And so all of a sudden we're saying that all these cultures, the Aboriginal people, I can go into them as well. I've gone to walk about
do you mind
in Outback. In the Outback,
yeah.
The Aboriginal elders, same thing. They were seated here by Pleiadians. This is their verbal handed down history for thousands of years. And I can go around the world and I can come up with all this information from all these eyewitness accounts from people that should be respected, dignified, and shouldn't be scoffed, and that we're now saying that all this information that they put forward, all their verbal handwritten history, all their written history, that's got to go to the side because this one text is 1,000% accurate.
Sure, but so my question is, most of that is oral history, correct?
Oh, it's all oral history, even the Bible.
Okay, so when we're engaging with oral history, what methodologies are you using to confirm that the orality is accurate?
So once again, by asking a clarifying question, Wes is setting himself up for a complete slam dunk. And I want you to really, really closely pay attention to this next section.
Well, first and foremost, some of these texts some of these cultures have written down information in caves. You've got cave paintings. The Dogon tribe actually have not only written down.
Sure. No, I don't disagree with that. The question is one of historic. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. The question is one of methodological analysis. So you have to have a method by which you can find either that something is falsifiable or that there are avenues by which you can show internal and external accuracy of credibility. So this is what we do with documents. This is what we do with the ancient Gospels. This is what I do. I've worked on Xenophon and Plutarch, and we look at the internal evidences and the external multivalent corroboration to try to figure out, okay, yes, we have all these stories. Great. I don't deny that. But as a historian, as someone who's trying to figure out what is accurate, how do you know if I use the term verisimilitude, do you know what that term means?
No, but I can tell you this. Tell me how the Dogon tribe saw Sirius B, knew the orbit of Sirius B, a trinary star system, accurately, and can show you the orbit with a special tool that they made that was given to them by these people. How do they know the shapes, the sizes, the colors, and the orbital pattern of all these planets in our solar system and other star alignments that they would use to have something called the Ziggy and planet and their own harvesting and planting and so forth and so on? That's not enough evidence that there's something.
Well, I'm not aware of that particular case. And even, I would grant that, the ancient people are far more technological advanced than we give themselves credit for. Just because they're ancient doesn't mean they're stupid. I am well aware, as someone who has done both investigation of the past and done archaeological analysis, that is a reality. My question is simply, okay, you have these stories or you have these accounts, you're referring to them as eyewitness testimony. How are you going about verifying that as that?
Okay, so notice how Wes redirects the conversation back to his original line of questioning. He's not chasing Billy's red herring here, and this is actually masterful on Wes's part. In a debate setting, it can be very easy to get distracted by like every claim that someone makes, but instead, Wes gets the conversation back on track.
Well, if the people had eyewitness testimony about Jesus, they then just wrote down their eyewitness testimony on a piece of paper or parchment paper or papyrus. So these people...
Right. So that's where internal methodological analysis...
Some of it's actually written down. So, it's the same exact thing. There's really no difference.
Well, no. So you do internal investigations to figure out when something was dated. So something like... So when I use that term verisimilitude before, that's something we as historians are looking for. It's a term that simply means the appearance or likelihood of truthfulness. So when you do historical analysis, it's an inference to the best explanation. So you have proof and you have data, and you're extrapolating that data on levels of probability. So some things can be confirmed as high probabilistically true, and other things are lower in their probability that they happened. But there are different methodologies, different ways that you explore historically how that happens.
Well,
so for the Gospels, we look at...
With the Dogon tribe, scientists went there to visit the tribe.
Man, he keeps talking about the Dogon tribe.
Because they used their modern science. They took the best scholars to visit these people, and they're still scratching their heads. Something happened there.
Sure. And I'm not even denying that necessarily. But the question is, okay, we need different levels of evidence and exploration, not just scientifically, but historically, to derive something as eyewitness testimony. Now, we have mountains of that, and I'm more than willing to go into some of that with the Gospels as early eyewitness testimony that can be verified externally and internally. But nonetheless, the only reason I ask, Billy, is because I've listened to a fair amount of your content, and I'm unaware of the methods that you use to try to discern between what is an accurate source historiographically and an inaccurate source historiographically.
Well,
does that make sense?
I use getting in an airplane and traveling to these places, doing my own research, talking with the indigenous cultures, and researching as much of the text that is available that I can possibly find.
Okay, so here we finally get a response from Billy to the question that Wes has been asking over and over. Billy says that he gets on airplanes, he sort of collects personal anecdotes, and then researches the text as much as he possibly can. Let's now see how Wes responds.
Okay, so I don't dispute that, and I do believe you have done that. But I mean, even from what we've talked about, so you've researched the text, but when we talked about the crucifixion, everything you cited was either, and I mean with all due respect, false in terms of the Sinai Bible, because Codex Sinaiticus is just a 4th century Greek manuscript of the Gospels that we have today, or they were verified forgeries in terms of the Gospel of Jesus' wife and the Gospel of Barnabas.
You may be right on that particular part of the topic, but like I said, that's less than 0.1% of the information that I hold.
Sure, but that was the original question. So yeah. So that's what I'm saying. I'm saying, okay, well, so I'm going off of what we've already talked about. So you've said you explore the text. I don't deny that. But the evidence, by going off of what you have put forward in terms of the actual documentary evidence, is not just less than convincing in my respect. And I mean this with respect, because I think you have done a lot of research. You've traveled to these places. I have too. Like, this is what I do as my career. But I'm not really getting indication, because in history, we go to the primary sources in their primary languages. And when Mark asked, okay, why do you deny the crucifixion? The sources you used were not primary.
Okay, we're still talking about the same thing over and over again. There's so much more we can talk about here. We're wasting a lot of time.
Okay, so Billy's obviously trying to change the subject again, but Wes is saying here, he's saying, look, I don't doubt that you've traveled on airplanes and that you've collected personal anecdotes, but the depth of your research here is clearly lacking. And instead of challenge this, Billy wants to just change the subject and discuss other topics. Here's what I can basically guarantee Wes was thinking during this section right here. If your level of research led you to be utterly, embarrassingly wrong about Codex Sinaiticus and the Gospel of Barnabas, it's very unlikely that your level of research in these other topics you want to discuss have actually led you to the truth. Now, if you'd like an even deeper rundown of the debate strategy Wes had going into this debate, along with some talking points he didn't have a chance to get into, go check out my 2-hour stream with Wes and Avery from God Logic. See you over there, and remember, Christianity is true.
All right. Whoa. That was a heavy dose. Let's see what happened. Let's see what happened after the fact, after this debate. I already know, but I'll just give it out to you.
Billy Carson is attempting to sue me. For those of you who don't know, I was invited to interact with Billy on a podcast that he agreed to come on. It was not his podcast, where he was notified beforehand who I was and what we'd be talking about. After that debate took place, Billy attempted to suppress the footage. That didn't really work. I've released clips from that conversation. Well, Billy does not want you to see those clips and has sent me a cease and desist letter. I was really hoping that this could be an opportunity for Billy to learn, to see the major errors that he's been repeating and turn this into a learning experience. I even offered to follow up with Billy in order to show him how and where he could find accurate and credible resources in order to make sure that what he was saying was verifiably correct going forward in the future, so he and his audience could learn and proceed knowledgeably. Billy did not agree. But unfortunately for Billy, agreeing to a debate, losing that debate, and feeling embarrassed about that loss does not constitute legitimate grounds to litigate. Billy, I will agree to all the terms and conditions of the cease and desist letter that you have sent me if you agree to run it back, sit down with me in person, and have another discussion. This is my formal response.
Ooh. To the point. That would be a good one. That would reach over 1 million views. Now let's see what happened after the cease and desist letter was given to Wes Huff.
So, Billy Carson recently hosted a 3.5-hour live stream to address his poor debate performance against Wes Huff. But instead of him redeeming himself, it became one of the most painful, self-inflicted disasters that I've ever seen. His own fans turned on him in the comments as he spiraled, made excuses, unveiled plans to silence Christian creators, and revealed how he really feels about Christianity.
What is a sadistic narcissist? Let's take a look at some of the traits and see if we can compare them to this quote-unquote God of the Bible.
As well as
poor people who work a 9 to 5.
I let a lot of it slip because a lot of these people are just ignorant poor people. You know, they're just poor people. I'm not a Joe Schmo 9 to 5 worker bee.
So honestly, this one was an absolute mess, but you don't have to sit through all 3.5 hours. I've broken down the most important moments, covering the fallout, the debate response, and the meltdown. So let's dive in, because this is going to be an eye-opening reveal about the real Billy Carson. So Billy's livestream was supposed to expose the fake debate that he recently took part in, but quickly spiraled into disaster. He started by announcing lawsuits against everyone involved: the host, the opponent, and even the editor. But it wasn't long before his fans started turning on him in droves. They were furious that he wouldn't admit to an obvious loss. I had to unsubscribe. It's one thing to be a sore loser, but to not admit defeat means you cannot learn or grow due to no lesson being received. Billy, brother, I really want to see you win, but you're fighting against your own message right now. I hope you can recover from this, but you have to look in the mirror because this behavior is unacceptable. Really? Billy, you should be 100% honest when you discuss what happened. You are not building credibility, and I am a fan of yours. I used to like this guy, but literally 5 minutes into this video, I was done with him. But for some fans, the frustration went even deeper. Several other commenters pointed out something even more troubling about Billy's response. You should take this video down. Most of your fans are poor people. The poor people are the ones who made you powerful. So what did Billy say on his live stream that drove his fans to say this? Well, it started with Billy unnecessarily and continuously humble bragging about how much money that he has in a way that felt tone deaf and out of touch with his audience.
We have 5 AC units, and I don't even know which one of them is acting up. I normally take the elevator upstairs. You know, I've had a chef for 10 years, and they like the food from coming over and eating the food at our house, and now they share our chef. You know, we are hopping off of a private jet. We relaxed in a huge 8,500 square foot mansion with our best friends on a tiny private island. I'm actually sleeping in my movie theater. In my house, I have a movie theater. I'm sleeping in the movie theater.
But what really set fans off was his blatant mockery about those who he deemed poor, especially 9 to 5 workers.
This is what they try to do when you get famous.
Mistruths.
I let a lot of it slip because a lot of these people are just ignorant poor people. You know, they're just poor people. They're just ignorant. So I let a lot of it, whatever, man. These people are just poor dummies. You know, what can you do? I make more money than rappers. I'm not a Joe Schmo 9 to 5 worker bee. You thought I was just some dumb black guy that just happened to get a little lucky with a couple of clips online and gain some popularity. Like Kendrick Lamar say, they not like us. They not like us.
Now, first off, you can't quote Kendrick while you're acting like Drake. And secondly, now this earlier comment suddenly makes more sense. But if obliviously mocking his fans wasn't bad enough, Billy took things to another level when he admitted this.
The money that you thought you were making and the popularity you thought you were making is all going to be spent on attorney's fees. And I don't care if I win or lose. I just want you to spend money.
Now, if you aren't aware, what he just admitted to was filing what's called slap lawsuits, which are designed to silence critics and burden the defendant with legal costs until they abandon their criticism. And he even went so far as to say that he's gonna sue the host of the podcast for
$1 million and possibly even more.
Now, not only does admitting this ruin the little bit of chances that he had at winning the lawsuit, but it also opens him up to counter lawsuits. And unsurprisingly, fans and critics alike saw this as a massive overreaction to a debate being published. But as we'll see next, Billy's excuses and evidence for his debate performance didn't just fail to clear his name, they made things far worse, with some even calling him a fraud. And speaking of fraud, before we get into that, did you know that American homeowners nationwide have over $32 trillion?
Now, here are the circuits that Wes Huff is on right now. And I can't play these ones now because the other two, those are men of the Lord. Those are Christians. They're not going to go ahead. They're not going to dock me for playing their content. But, PBD podcast, they might get me. So what I'll do is I'll just try to.
Are repeated, often enough and loud enough online that they people in their minds, it becomes true. And then you have other arguments that are more novel. And I find Billy's arguments are more novel than they're not.
All right. So that's Wes Huff now. Now he was allowed to be on PBD podcast, which has almost Well, he's got 2.4 million subscribers. But also, Wes Huff is now, before he went on PBD, he was allowed onto Joe Rogan's podcast. And that right there, he was already, PBD is a big dog. But, Joe Rogan, everybody knows who Joe Rogan is pretty much if you got a smartphone. Having said that, the man made his way onto the Joe Rogan podcast. So, I mean, definitely the Lord has used this opportunity with Wes to win many people to the kingdom. And it's incredible. It's incredible how the Lord has been able to use Wesley Huff in this manner, because Billy Carson, he really didn't debate anybody. The people that he had conversations with, if you want to call them a debate, they weren't rooted in the Word of God. They weren't rooted in biblical studies. And when I say rooted, I mean they might have had a lot of head knowledge, but they couldn't cast down every art. They can't. They're those that can't cast down. You don't have to cast down every argument if you can't, but man, at least the major ones. If you're gonna believe something, at least be able to, for one, stand by it, and for two, support the facts, whatever your facts may be. And so, having said all of this, I'm wrapping this episode up. Again, these are the podcasts. These are the platforms that my previous podcast before these videos that I'm now doing are on, but also these videos that I'm now doing, they're on the same channel. All the links are listed below. Feel free to check them out. Feel free to leave any comments. I'm not going to stray away from feedback, positive feedback, things that I can do to make this new endeavor that I'm taking on better than what it has become right now from the very first few videos that I have recently done since the beginning of this year, and Lord willing, that I'll continue to do in the future. Having said that, everybody have a good night. Stay safe and stay out of trouble.
So goodbye for us. You have to say it, baby. And us in Texas, you wanna try, baby. I know you can, I know your heart, and you will figure out you love me now, 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 you know I gotta leave. You love me now, 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 you know I gotta leave. Figure